Hello there. I want to talk about the relationship between innovation, speed, and quality. But before we do that, I have three premises I want to get off my chest. The first one is we all want things to go fast. We want to do things yesterday rather than tomorrow. It's just how we are as humans. We want things now. The second is we want them to be amazing. We want to create great products, amazing services, incredible experiences. We want things to be good. And we also understand that there is a combination or kind of getting both of those right. It's tricky. Now, what do? We ask ourselves questions. We ask, is it good enough? Could it be better? Are we doing things well enough? Is this really enough for the market or the people we're trying to serve? Are we going too fast? Should we use more time or more energy or more money, more resources? Should we delay a bit to heighten quality? These are the kinds of questions we ask ourselves. It all boils down to one question. That is it ready for the world? Whatever it is we're doing, is it a concert? Is it a piece of software? Is it a new political movement? Is it ready to see the light of day? And if we're smart, we also have one extra question. Is the world ready for it, whatever it may be? So here's what gets tricky. And to help me with exposing that tricky, I went looking for failures. I went to the internet. I went to Board Panda. And at Board Panda, I found this lovely list. It's called 74 failed products that made these companies regret creating them. It's a pretty grand claim. So I thought, this is good. I can use examples from here. And don't get me wrong, it's a great list. It has things like New Coke. If you don't know about New Coke, Google it. Lovely, huge, not exactly a success. It has Bic's pen for her, because obviously women need their own pen. No way. No. Okay. It was also not exactly a commercial success, because why would anyone buy this? And then this, one of my favorites from the list, Colgate's 1982 attempt at entering the frozen foods market. Well, it turns out if you are a giant in teeth, in what is it called, dental hygiene, in toothpaste and toothbrushes, then maybe getting into the fast food, or not fast food, but at least like the frozen food market with pizzas and lasagnas is not really, it's not your best move. Let's just say it flopped and leave it at that. There's just one issue with these beautiful things, just like the rest of this wonderful list. These are not failures that are due to speed. In fact, few things are. Few big business failures happen because people just made snap decisions and went with it. And just to illustrate a point, I'm going to bring you into my world for a while. Let me tell you about the time when I've moved the fastest. I want to take you back to 2014. And I want to take a look at this one Facebook post. This was made on April the 11th, and this was made a week after a conference. This is about the College of Wizardry, a live action role play event at a wonderful castle in Poland. You can see it on the picture. And we made one single Facebook post for that event on my personal wall, one. 48 hours, it had sold out. Now, the event is amazing. It's a place where people from all over the world can come, and they can be witches and wizards and pretend to be living a life of magic, studying magic at a magical school. And it's a real Polish castle with secret corridors. And maybe they're not real ghosts, but they're at least pretend ghosts. I'm no longer part of it, but it's still there. And we'll get to why that's important. But we're back in 2014. And back then, there was just that one Facebook post. We didn't know that it was going to become the most famous live action role play event on the planet. This is just part of the media coverage that College of Wizardry has received over the last couple of years. And behind the scenes, was there a smooth, well-oiled organization at the beginning where this was the culmination of years of planning? I think you can already guess the answer to that one. The main organizers, the two project leaders, me and Draken Dembinski, our creative lead, and myself, the overall project lead, we had only met a week before at this conference where we'd been drunk together, and we talked about it would be interesting to do a Harry Potter inspired live action role play event. Draken had a castle, I had some experience, we knocked it together, we said, let's do this. A week before, we hadn't known each other's names. The team didn't know each other at all. Well, most of them knew somebody from the team, but to say it was one team, that would be pretty wrong. We had about 20 Polish volunteers for that first run. I didn't know any of them except Draken at this point. The website, yeah, that was something I knocked out in a couple of hours using some pictures I found on the internet of the castle, some very vague description. And I had some friends who came to me with good reason and said, Klaus, this new thing you're cooking up, there's not enough detail for us to make an informed decision on whether to go. And they were right. It was pretty sparse with information. The main designers, well, including me and our head logistics chef, Charles, another Dane, we hadn't even been on location yet. And if you're doing a physical event where physical design is a lot of it, and you don't know the location, that's a bit tricky. It's not impossible, but it is tricky. And the budget, let's just say the budget was based on guesses and leave it at that. Now, and this is something that's pretty unique for that, because if you're Toyota and you're launching a new car, you don't need to have a plan for magic. But we were doing a Harry Potter role-playing experience, an immersive experience where you get to be part of the world. You get to step into that reality. We didn't have a plan for magic. We didn't have a plan for how to simulate magic, how to get the feeling of magic. We ended up having a brilliant one that the Poles came up with. But when we started, we didn't have a plan for that. To say it was utter madness is an understatement, but we did it. And we thought we might sell 100 tickets in 6 months. We thought we had okay brand names for ourselves. We had some nice reputation. We had this amazing venue, this castle. We had the Harry Potter fiction, very popular, still is. And we thought we might just sell 100 tickets, and it was a volunteer event. Might just do that in 6 months. 48 hours, we sold 138 and had a wait list. Since then, College of Wizardry and its successors and spin-offs and copycats have been visited by more than 10,000 people from all over the world. And I can't remember when we stopped counting media impressions, when we stopped counting this video about it has been shown, but it's a long time ago that we hit 100 million. I was close to writing 1 billion plus. It might even be there, but I wasn't completely sure. But this has been seen by people all over the world and is not a small thing. It's still there. I'm not associated with it anymore. It's now run by different people, wonderful people. Part of the original crew is still there. But if you want a magical experience in Poland, then I suggest you go to this castle. It's amazing. New Coke, however, yeah, that's not around anymore. And Emma, is what I'm trying to say, is it that we're smarter than Coke? No, by no means. That would be idiotic of me to postulate. No, we're by no means smarter. What it is we're definitely faster. And if that's not the case, what's the lesson here? I can't really talk to you about lessons, but I can talk about 10 tips from my life on the speed versus quality and innovation discussion, and a bonus tip, which you might even find to be the best one of them. I hope so. Tip number 1, it can always get better. You can always improve. You can always refine. You can always give it one more spin, do one more iteration, do one more test. You can always make it better. There's no such thing as perfect. Number 2, it's never going to be done. That's the flip side of the coin. If it's never perfect, it's never done. It's just a matter of when you choose to press the button. Done is when you say it's done. Done is when you launch. Done is when you ship. Done is when you let it go. There's no such thing as done. Number 3, with that said, when you can, prototype, prototype, prototype. The faster you prototype, the faster you hit the real world and get people a chance to see what you're doing, the faster you can implement their changes and their ideas. Prototype, prototype, prototype. Number 4, compliance is a real thing. There are many of you who work in industries and spheres where rules are there to be followed. Whether you're in banking or in aviation or you run a circus, there are rules and they need to be taken seriously, except when they don't, because sometimes the rules are there to be bent. Sometimes the rules are not really rules, but just traditions. And the difference between compliance, which is to rules and it's something you should do if you don't want to break the law, and rules that people think are these are how we do things, that is sometimes a razor thin line. And knowing the difference can make a huge, huge impact on how your innovation efforts go. Tip number 6, critics are everywhere. If you look for somebody that doesn't like something, that's easy to find. Successful authors, successful musicians, artists, engineers, entertainment companies, people who launch space shuttles, you can always find somebody who's willing to say they did it wrong, they're idiots, they don't know what they're talking about. If you want to find critics, that's easy. If you're going to be silenced by critics, if you're going to quit because you get criticized, then you might as well not do any innovation, because somebody's going to think it's wrong. Somebody's going to feel this is bad. So if you want critics, they're easy to find. If you want to do innovation, you need to learn how to ignore them. And the truth is unpopular. There are a lot of things out there where we live in these lovely, shall I call them fantasies. We don't like truth. We like hearing what we like hearing. We don't want somebody to tell us that things are wrong. We don't want to hear that our industry is exploding, or that we're being disrupted, or what we're doing is wrong. It doesn't matter if it's that we're smoking and trying to give up that habit and somebody tells us how dangerous it really is. It doesn't matter when somebody says, if it's somebody saying, oh, but the thing you think is dangerous, it's actually not. We don't like truth. You might as well get used to it. And that leads us to a scary thing, that is that perception is reality. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant, he said a lot of things, but one of the things he said was that he talked about das Ding an sich, the thing in itself, and das Ding für uns, the thing for us. Kant said we can never really see the thing in itself. We can't see or perceive das Ding an sich. We can only see the thing for us. And Kant is right. And for a lot of things, perception these days is more important than reality, because perception is reality. And the faster you get used to that, the more successful your innovation is going to be, because you're not only going to be innovating the things you can measure and the things you feel are right, but also in the things that other people take into account. Things like brand value, reputation, they're real, even if they're all about perception, because perception is reality. Number 9, if you have one person, maybe 2 people, because there's another coming up, but if you have 2 people that you should look up after this talk, one of them is Rory Sutherland, an advertising guru. And Rory has a ton of excellent points. But one of these things that is consistent with him is that he talks about human behavior. He talks about behavioral economics, behavioral science. And he talks about how we're not really that good at things like facts and numbers, but we're very good at things like emotions and stories. If you want to be inspired by somebody, be inspired by Rory Sutherland. Final tip on the 10-tip list is Coca-Cola is still around. They may have had a massive failure with New Coke, but they rebounded. They've had smaller failures since, tons of them, but they've also had successes. So even a massive billion-dollar world-encompassing failure of epic proportions that people still talk about nearly 40 years later, they're still around. They're still number 1. So don't be too afraid of failing. If Coke could live through it, you can as well. And then I promised you a bonus tip. That bonus tip comes from this guy, Eric Jewell. And Eric is not only a professor of computer science, he's also my stepfather. That is why he's holding on this picture my daughter, Saga. Eric Jewell plus Saga. But why should you listen to Eric? Well, you should listen to Eric for many reasons, but one of them is that he's a glider pilot. He's also a professor of computer science, and that leads to a pretty weird example, pretty weird story that he sometimes tells, but it's quite powerful, and I'm going to share it with you. This is a glider that has landed in a field. Unlike Eric's glider, it doesn't have an engine, so it can't just take off again. This is a glider, and gliders often end up in fields. So what happens is they're approaching the field, and they're at this point. This is what Eric talks about. He says that when you're in the glider, you're sitting there and you need to land, and you need to decide, am I going to go for option A, where I swing in and land on the field this way, or am I going to circle around option B and land from the other way? Now, both of these have pros and cons. One is good for one thing and other is good for another. It's not an easy choice because it's hard to weigh them against each other. But if you don't do something, at some point you're going to end up with option B, because then option A will simply be gone. And Eric says that there are so many choices we have that are like this. They're similar choices. They're things that are either A or B, and it's not really clear which is best. Maybe it's one is good, maybe the other, but the difference between them is not really that big. And we spend a ton of time discussing what to do. These are the problems that we discuss, because option A is good, option B is also good, just in other ways. But these are the problems that we end up spending a majority of our time discussing, things that are almost the same. If we look at it in a different example, these two, if you had to choose between them, and here I'm not talking about which of them you want to hire or which of them you want to take home after a party. No, I'm talking about which of their clothes you want to wear. Is it the blue suit or the other blue suit? Sure, there are differences. Granted, there are differences in nuance, and there's a difference with the tie and that sort of thing. But the difference between the two, it's not that big. Coming in a t-shirt or dressed up as an elephant or naked, now that's a choice. But choosing one suit or the other, it's really not that big of a thing. And what Eric says is, when you get to this situation where one choice is more or less as good as another, instead of spending endless time arguing about it, you might as well just flip a coin and move on with it and say, okay, these are almost equally good. Let's go with option A, or let's go with option B. And if you're really modern and innovative and forward thinking, you might even flip a Bitcoin to show that you're kind of upbeat, on the beat, whatever. There was a joke there, it kind of failed, but Bitcoin is more modern than the penny. That's all I wanted to say. Remember one thing. Of all the things I've said, if you just remember one thing, it's this: you rarely know the odds. So make your decisions and move fast. Thank you.